Hello, everyone. Everyone will be muted when they come in, and as we go through the presentation, we'll unmute people so they can speak. Robert, I did unmute you just in case you wanted to say anything.
Thank you.
We'll get started here in a few minutes. Looks like everybody 6 o'clock started jumping in, so we'll give her a few minutes for everybody some other people to hop in here. Yeah, I told everybody before we let people in that at some point you're probably going to hear my dogs barking at people walking by, so I'm going to apologize. Yeah, we'll give it a couple more minutes here. I'll start about 6:05. We'll get going here just to make sure anybody coming a little late gets in. I haven't seen anybody hop in for a couple minutes here, so we'll get started and people can join as they come. Give me a second here to pull my screen up. All right, everybody should be seeing the presentation up there, or our PowerPoint here, so we'll there we go. So I just wanted to go over the meeting format for everybody, just so you know what to expect as we go through here. The meeting, obviously, we're all on Zoom. It's also being live streamed on YouTube on the Cincinnati Department of Transportation channel. Everybody, when you join, will be muted. You won't be able to unmute yourself. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat room. We have, or you can. There's a little raise your hand feature. If you find yourself on the participants, you can raise your hand. I want to kind of, feel free to speak up at any time as we're going through here. We have people watching for the chat and the raise your hand feature, and they'll let me know when someone has a question, and we'll get those in at the time. I don't want to wait till the end because I want to make sure we're getting questions and answers at the appropriate time and they make sense. So. There we go. So some introductions. My name is Brian Williams. I'm with the City Transportation and Engineering Department. We also have from DOTE, Morgan Colks. She was going to be transitioning as the project manager as we move this along. She's somewhat new to our planning section, so this is going to be her project as we move forward. Mel McVeigh is here with us. She's the heads up Division 0 for the city Department of Transportation. We also have Ursula Miller from DOTE. Rob Denham from DCED has joined us. I didn't see Andy Yingling from City Planning, so I'm not sure if he's actually in there or not.
He's on there.
Okay. Then from the West End Community Council, we have Robert Killens, the Community Council President, and Keith Blake, the past President and Finance Committee Chair. Robert or Keith, did you want to say anything before we get started here?
Well, a couple things. This is Robert. Just want to say thank you, first of all, Brian, for your efforts and all that have been involved. We regret what happened with Ms. Pringle. That kind of put a fine point on the effort, but we wanted to say thank you and let you know that there are several other members of the community council, that Amber Potts, our vice president, I see Tia Brown and others that have joined, as well as Mr. Lee on the phone. So thank you.
Thank you. And we'll get moving here. Kind of, why are we here? Why are we meeting? I think, Robert, you just kind of covered it a little bit there, but from DOT standpoint, Linn Street's been on our radar for quite a while. It's the pavement there's too much pavement out there. Let's put it that way. It's I'll say a suburban designed arterial in an urban neighborhood that needs to be fixed. It's been identified as one of the top corridors for pedestrian safety issues in the city. And we want to work with the community in the West End to revision Linn Street and get something new and that better serves everybody out there. So that's kind of why we're here, the kickoff meeting for that. So I wanted to go kind of through the process of how this project how we envision it going. So the first meeting, which is the one we're in right now, this is introduce the project, and we want to get the community's feedback. We'll get into that more later, but we want to know the issues you're having and what you want to see out there is kind of what we're hoping to get out of today's meeting. We'll take all that information, analyze that, and we'll have another public meeting. You'll notice I didn't put dates on here because there's a lot of things that can contribute to those dates, so I didn't want to tie us down, but the next public meeting will be probably 2 to 3 months from now. We got a lot of work to do internally with the data to get from step 1 to 2. Not only the data we collect from you, but also the crash data and the count data. We want to make sure we have all the information when we get to step 2 to present to you guys good options that are feasible. So at that meeting, we'll bring back a summary of kind of the feedback we got, and we'll present some different options and start talking through those different options and what we want to see out there, and then collect feedback on those options. And then the goal is to have a third meeting. Depending how all this goes, it might take more than 3 meetings, but ideally we would have a pretty good idea what we want. We would come to the third meeting with a final option or 2 and say, this is the one we're doing. We'll have some costs associated with those. And that's kind of the funding we have right now to get to that step. Actually, we can get to the next step. The next step is developing a funding plan to get the project actually constructed. And when we get to that part, it might be feasible to get it constructed, to break it into phases. So those are things we'll have to consider at that time when we're developing that funding plan. And then it's applying for funding. I anticipate this being federal and or state funds to get it built in some capacity. So at some point we'd be applying for funds, and then once we have those secured, it would be designing and constructing the project. And like I said, we kind of have funding to get through the planning process. We don't have any funding identified for any construction, or really any detailed design or construction. So as I mentioned, there were currently no funding beyond the planning process. The potential grants, there's a state safety program. This would be a very good project for that, I believe. But that grant specifically covers items that will deal with safety issues. So it doesn't cover aesthetics. And what I wanted to point out there is if we're doing things just to make it look nice, like streetscape stuff, like special pavers or decorative lighting, that kind of stuff, those are things we would have to find other funding for if we wanted to implement those. Those likely would not get funded with the safety grant. And I just wanted to point that out because when we've talked about other projects with communities, once we get, this is what we want to do, and then you have that design, and then you want to start making it look nice and adding all this stuff. I just want to make sure it's clear that those typically aren't going to be covered by the grants. So once we get to that point, we'll have to make sure we're finding funds for those features. See, I told you that was going to happen. Additional project funding to identify is the design and the construction management, testing, and the aesthetic items. So those are going to be at the proper point down the road. Those are going to be things we're going to have to work with the community and potentially council and find funding for those features. So the Linn Street corridor, we want to look at the whole thing from in the West End, from Court Street to Central Parkway. We kind of internally broke it into 3 sections because it kind of, for different reasons, made sense, but we're going to look at the whole thing with the planning part. We haven't got updated counts. That's something I want to try to do. Of course, with COVID, all counts are a little crazy right now, but the counts we had from previous ranged from 8,000 to 13,000 on Linn Street. So that's about what I expected. And those counts clearly say that there's way too many lanes and too much pavement on Linn Street, right? We can definitely take some travel lanes away. Some of the crash data for the section, I do want to point out that I put preliminary analysis on here because we have not looked at this in detail. I basically went into the database and just sucked the numbers out. And so with that gives a general idea, but our next step before the next meeting, we are going to go in and look at every single one of those crash reports and make sure they're correctly mapped or correctly labeled and they're in the right spot. And I do know there's probably more crashes because I found some that weren't mapped correctly, that were kind of on side streets. After the fact, I found those that were actually on Linn Street. So we will go through that in a lot more detail in this. So, and have a lot better information at the next meeting, but I wanted to point that out before I went through here because especially when I get to the ped and bike crashes here in a minute, that I think those are I actually think those are a little low, and they're still pretty high numbers. So you can see I kind of broke this from Court to Ezra Charles because when you looked at the map of the crashes, that was a nice clean spot to break it into 2 sections. So over 3 years, there were 85 crashes between Court and Ezra Charles. Rear end and side swipe passing were the most, and not surprising for this corridor. The side swipe passing in particular, that's typically somebody slowing down to turn or slowing down for some reason and somebody trying to go around them and they don't quite make it. So with the complaints we've had of speeding and stuff, that's pretty much what this shows here, kind of the summary. So the next section was just north of Ezra Charles' Central Parkway. A little less accidents in that, a little longer block, longer section, but less accidents. But it was the same thing. The angle crashes are at intersections, and this section does have more intersections that are not signalized, so that doesn't surprise me. That would be angle crashes or somebody pulling out at an intersection and hitting somebody or getting hit by somebody on the cross street. So those numbers doesn't surprise me either. And again, you see the side swipe passing, which more than likely we are going to find is people trying to pass slow cars that are slowing down. So then the rear end is those are typically at signalized intersections where we see the rear end. So it probably won't do much to improve that number, but we should be able to have a big impact on the other numbers we saw there. I looked at 5.5 years roughly of pedestrian and bicycle crash data. And you can see like I said, I actually think this might be a little low because I think some of those accidents are not mapped correctly when we get into it. And I'm pretty sure there's at least one other fatality in those years. So I got to look back and find that. So that's, we'll have updated data here, but that's, those are pretty significant numbers. And I believe, I should have marked this. I believe all but 2 of those are actually pedestrian. There were 2 of those were bike crashes. The other 29 were pedestrian crashes. So we're going right through this here. We're almost at the end. I'm going to let Morgan take over discussing the kind of the cross sections and what we're going to look at.
Thanks. Yeah, so as we said earlier, we kind of broke this into kind of 3 manageable sections. We will analyze the entire corridor, but just to kind of help kind of go over what we're looking for. If you look at just Court to Ezra Charles, the right-of-way varies from like 90 feet to 100 feet, which is actually pretty wide. It's a lot of space to work with. The existing section there is 4 through lanes. You also have a center left turn lane and dedicated parking lanes on both sides. There was a past project in there, so you do have a tree lawn on the east side with an 8-foot sidewalk. And then on the west side, it kind of goes from about 10 to 12 feet of sidewalk over there. So there's definitely a lot. There's a lot of space out there, and we have some room for some options. You want to go to the next slide? So kind of what we're looking for from you guys is your feedback based on these things Brian kind of went over with the data, and then kind of what you have out there. We're kind of looking for what issues do you guys typically see in this corridor? What are some things that you would like to see? Like, do you want a bike facility? Do you want wider sidewalks? Is parking a priority for you? And like, what do you consider the priorities in the area? We do have on our website where you kind of click to go in there is a feedback form. So we are kind of hoping after this meeting, you guys can kind of take a look at that and to that feedback form and kind of let us know what you are thinking. We will also take some questions now. If anybody has questions, things they want to comment on.
Yeah, if anybody has, go in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll answer the. I'm happy to discuss anything here, but like Morgan said, we would like to encourage people to go to the website and fill out a feedback form, even if we talked about it here, just so we have a record of that. It'll be easier for us to, we are recording this, so we'll know what everybody says, but it'd be nice to have that written record as well.
Yeah, that feedback form is what we're going to use to do a lot of the analysis and prioritizing and putting those options together to present to you guys in the next meeting. So I highly encourage you to fill out that feedback form. We did have somebody comment they would love to see a two-way protected bike lane added for the length of the corridor and take a lane of traffic and turn it into that trail. Thank you for that comment.
Morgan, it looks like we have a hand raised.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Potts.
Yeah, hi, I'm Amber Potts. I'm the Vice President of the West End Community Council, and we're currently in the community budget request process. And I know we briefly discussed it before, and if we need to answer this question offline, that's fine. But about funding and whether we should include it in this year's request or not. One, or whether we should include it in this year or next year to help ensure that this project ends in actual results and improvements to Linn Street, and then whether we should include it in this year's budget or not, like budget request.
My opinion on that, and maybe Rob Denham can chime in. Might have to find it. I think it's too early for this round because we don't know what we want to do. And we have the funding to get through the planning stage, which is probably going to take most of 6 to 9 months to get through. And then we should have hopefully we have an idea of what we want to do out there, and that would be the time to apply for that funding. So next year would probably be a better time to apply for that.
Sorry, the budget request is for 2022 and 2023 fiscal year, I believe.
Let
me see if I can double check that real quick. Or if Keith or Robert want to weigh in on that.
Second.
Rob Denham, do you know the answer to that question?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if I haven't been working with Keith and Robert on that community benefits. We worked with Tia on MBDIP funding, but I think that's separate from what you're speaking, right?
Yeah, this would be the CBR. Yeah, I just looked. It's the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget.
Yeah. What city department are you guys working with on that?
Well, depending on what projects we submit, we get to submit 3. We would be working with DOTE.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking of the other project list that's going on right now.
Yeah.
I don't. We could put something in for it. I still don't think it's the right time because we don't know what we want to do and what we would be asking for. But if we want to put in something, I just don't know I don't know what that would be or what we would ask for or how much.
And I mean, do you think it would help to ensure like the project doesn't stall at any point? I guess that's the thing. Does it add any emphasis, or is this on everyone's radar and we don't necessarily need to do that? I guess.
I think this is on everyone's radar. I don't think that's going to change the timeline or the path of this project. I don't really see I see this project needing some kind of grant to get constructed anyway. So that's going to set the timeline for when it happens, is whatever grant we apply for, those funds.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Robert. I just think there's, and thanks for the form. I asked a question about the form, and I think Melissa answered it. There are a lot of, opportunities here, and we just want to make sure you get as much feedback as possible. So is it ideal to have as many residents and individuals complete the forms, separate individuals? Are you able to put your name? What would make sense in terms of promoting feedback?
Yeah, I think we would love to have as many people as possible fill out that form, and it does ask for your name and kind of, your what you use Linn Street for, if you live or work there, or if you just pass through it, and if you pass through it, are you in a car or a bike or a pedestrian? So yeah, as much feedback as we can get, the more information, the better. It'll definitely help us when it comes to developing options, and the more feedback, the better.
All right, thank you. I saw a note in from Superintendent Matthews of the CCPA, which is a very large school system on Linn Street, and with the children and the buses. I know he's had some particular concerns about that. And I know he put a note in there, so I think that's an issue that we're concerned with. We have from kindergarten to senior citizens all sort of traversing and residing on that thoroughfare, and it being a connector of sorts up to the 8th Street to go over to Price Hill and other places. So I know it's a heavily traveled thoroughfare with lots of age groups trying to maneuver. So safety is paramount. I'm delighted that we're engaged in this process, and we'll promote the link. We'll push it hard and ask people to complete it.
That would be great.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, somebody did mention about the, like you said, that crosswalk in front of the 2 daycares. And I think somebody else had mentioned maybe like a roundabout at one of the intersections. Those are perfect comments to make at the end of that feedback form, where you can kind of write in, because we don't have every possible option listed in there, and we definitely don't have it down to like detail areas. But that's the kind of information that's great for us to have in that comment section.
So we have a few more questions. I'm going to go ahead and unmute Derek.
I got, looks like John Harmon had his hand up first, so he's already unmuted. So John.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it. Want to thank you guys again for hosting this. This is going to be incredibly powerful. You showed the image of the block of Linn with Chestnut and Elizabeth. I just live at the end of Chestnut, and frequently that crosswalk where Donna Pringle was killed is a tough spot. And yet, for a lot of the kids in the neighborhood, the pool is right across the street. The rec center, is adjacent with the pool. And so you do see a lot of travel there. And yet the traffic, as you pointed out with the counts, is lower than the street needs to be. It's exciting to see that we are digging in on this. I was tangentially involved in the Liberty Street road diet and that public process, which was amazing, multi-year, so many different engagement points. How do you see this process in terms of laying out the options, taking in the feedback, being similar and or different to that process or any others that DOT has taken, just so people can visualize what will be brought back in the second meeting, what might be then brought back in the third meeting, so we can see this sort of amazing arch to where we get to the road that we hope can be safer for our neighborhood. Thanks.
So similar and different from Liberty. Similar in that I hope we get as much public involvement as we did there. I'm hoping this is less controversial and we can get to a conclusion a lot sooner so we can get something actually constructed out here. I would like to see us be done with the planning process. An ideal would be 6 to 9 months. And then we can start figuring out how to get it funded and move forward. But that all depends on, mostly that depends on the community deciding what we want to do, because we're going to come back with a lot of options the next meeting. And a lot of them are going to be mix and match options. And they could be different from one block to the next as well. So it's in anything we're going to present, we're going to be behind. If you choose that, that's going to be fine with us. So it's kind of going to be we're going to kind of leave it up to the community to say, this is what we want. So that's in some other projects we've had, that's kind of where sometimes it gets bogged down, is trying to get that. But I think this is a project everybody knows something needs to be done. And everybody's kind of on the same page. It's just figuring out the best way to do that. And I'm hopeful that this project we'll get through that process smoothly, and in about 6 to 9 months, we'll have our answer. So let's see, Derek, it takes a little delay there unmuting you, but you should be, try that again. Oh, sorry. I think I accidentally muted you again.
There, we got it?
Yep.
All right, hey, thanks, Brian. First of all, for those that don't know me, I'm on the city's Vision Zero advisory panel, and been actively involved in these efforts in a number of neighborhoods and different projects. I'm super excited about this because we really have the opportunity here to really do something fantastic that I think could be a model for the rest of the city. So I just want to make a kind of a broad comment and just say, maybe we don't know even what all the possibilities might be. I think it's an opportunity for us to perhaps even to do something differently and more than's been done elsewhere. And one example of that I've seen used very effectively in other cities is, for example, raised crosswalks, where it's kind of a speed hump built in to the crosswalk, so cars have to slow down at the exact place where people are crossing. Things like that. There are probably a lot of other ideas, but to really have an open mind and do something maybe that's visionary, and the West End could be the leader and an example for the rest of the city, going forward, of doing some of these things to make that street much, much safer than it currently is. And then I had a specific question. I appreciate Wade's comment about the bike lanes, because I think there's an opportunity here, and Robert used the word a connector. And I think we have an opportunity here as well, because I know the city has some type of a plan for bike lanes on West 8th, if I'm not mistaken. And then also we have the Central Parkway bike lane, which I think we're going to have the opportunity in the future to hopefully improve upon that. And that this could be a great connector from a bike perspective for bike lanes and separated and protected bike lanes, and to connect to the other infrastructure that already exists and what might be planned. And then we know we're doing other things in terms of in Price Hill and Lower Price Hill in terms of bike lanes there. And when you start looking at the bigger picture, this is an opportunity. So my question is, I thought that there was some type of a plan just anyway, or at least a discussion around bike lanes on Linn Street. Is that the case? And is there anything else that we need to do to kind of move that discussion forward now relative to this greater road diet plan?
I'm not sure if the bike plan called out bike lanes on Linn. Mel, I don't know if you remember off the top of your head.
I can speak to that. We are hoping to leverage an opportunity with our street rehab program this year to add some bicycle lanes potentially to Linn Street. That is something that will still need to be approved by City Council. but that should be coming before them in the very near future.
So how would that then, like, in other words, you wouldn't want to build some kind of bike lane and then have this plan and then like be, you know, in other words, like dovetail that in and maybe make it better because it's part of a greater plan. Is this the time to have that discussion?
Right. Yes, we definitely would want to coordinate both of those together to make sure if the bike lanes happen with rehab, that it works and flows smoothly with any potential changes on Linn.
And I think, you know, when you go to the feedback form, bikes is on the list, bike facility. So, and those are the kind of things we're looking for, kind of for the feedback is there's a lot of things there's a lot of space on Linn Street, but there's also a lot of stuff that competes with each other for that space. So that's kind of what we want to get a feel for. You know, we're talking bike facility, you know, obviously parking. Somebody said angle parking, which we have some out there already, but maybe more. Wider sidewalks, wider medians. Like all that's great, but at some point we run out of space, so we have to figure out, kind of prioritize those and which and what do we want out there. So so that's part of what we're looking for on the feedback forms is kind of what's everybody want, and then we'll do our best to take that and make it work. Was there anything else, Derek?
No, that's it for me. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Let's see, we got Joe Blizzard. You should be.
Hi, Brian. Yep, I'm unmuted. Thank you. I'm a newer West End resident living on Cutter, and one of my observations is that a lot of the fast traffic that tends to come down this first cross section actually originates from the south to north direction, heading from 8th Street towards Court Street. And I noticed that part of the corridor is not a part of this first cross section. Is that planned to be in section 2 or 3? Am I jumping ahead? Or is there a way to get that taken into consideration just based on my personal observations of seeing extremely fast traffic coming from that direction?
So a couple ways to answer that. One, we kind of Court Street seemed like a good cutoff because that's where kind of I don't want to say the neighborhood ends, but that's where kind of the buildings and the residential ends. And then we do have plans for bike lanes across that part of Linn Street. Another reason we didn't really include it is there's not much we can do because that's mostly structure, a bridge. There's not much we can do to change the curb lines on that. We can do a lot of stuff with paint, which we will do because whatever we do here, that's going to have to tie in. So there will be changes there. It'll mostly be with paint. We'll be able to do something at the intersection of Court and Linn to narrow that intersection up. But as far as that kind of block between 8th and Linn, a lot of that structure. So without a substantial cost, we can't really change much except without paint. So didn't really put that as part of this project, but there will end up being changes there at some point.
Okay. Yeah, and I was thinking, I mean, even something, and I'm no expert here, but even something like a traffic light at that intersection to help slow down the vehicles that are coming through, or like you said, changes to the road at that intersection, I think could help influence the traffic coming from that direction. I just wanted to make sure that observation was out there. So thank you. And then one other quick point would be, I know a lot of the data that you guys have pulled together so far is based on historic traffic counts and incidents and things of that nature. How is the increased traffic from the new FC Cincinnati Stadium being taken into account into the study, or is there a way to take that into account, knowing that at certain times there will be some increased traffic flow through there, and at times a lot of folks that aren't maybe familiar with the neighborhood? So just want to make sure that thought was captured as well.
So actually, Keith Blake and I had a little conversation before the meeting about this. The big picture answer to that is the FC plan doesn't call for any traffic to need to use Linn Street, other than Central Parkway is going to be closed during FC events, and that'll likely be detoured towards Linn Street, but that's actually a very small number. Um, uh, so I'm not worried about FC traffic big picture. Now that doesn't mean I expect the volumes to pick up just because it's in the area and people are going to use it even though they don't necessarily need to. And Keith's point, which is a very good one, is right now there's free parking on Linn Street and people always find free parking. So there's probably going to be people going to Linn Street to park to get to the stadium, which is good and bad, right? It's going to put a lot more traffic than needed on Linn Street, but it's also going to keep some of those people from going in the neighborhood with their cars. They'll park on Linn Street and walk over. So
yeah, and my one observation, Brian, on that would be that there is a decent amount of traffic that uses Linn to get to heading southbound on Linn to get to 6th Street to jump onto the highway there, because you can get to 71 south, you can get to 75 south from there, over to 471, as well as Route 50 from that 6th Street entrance. So I can foresee instances before and after games where there is a lot of traffic in and around that area.
So this is a very high level of the FC plan, because I am involved with that and helping with the event day traffic plan. But part of the plan with that was to divide and conquer the traffic. So we're trying to keep traffic from crossing over. So anybody coming from 71 is kind of forced east. You know, they come in from the east, they're forced back east, and same thing from the west. So hopefully we don't get people. I mean, there will be some, but hopefully large numbers of people won't be going west to get south to get back on 71. Just because of the way the setup is, we're trying to discourage that and kind of keep that east-west traffic from crossing over as much as possible. But there are going to be, you know, we're planning for FC, but you know, we're doing our best guess. We don't know what's actually going to happen when it actually opens and people start coming to it. So there's going to be changes, and Linn Street's the same thing. And I don't think we want, well, we know FC's there. We know people are going to come to Linn Street. I don't think we really want to plan to consider that when we're planning for Linn Street. We want Linn Street to serve the neighborhood. That's all it needs to do. And you know, if people get stuck in traffic on Linn Street during a game, well, you know, hopefully they don't like it and they go a different way the next time. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. To be clear, I wasn't advocating that we keep Linn Street wider. I like the narrowing, and I think that finding the right solution there makes sense. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I add a little something to that? Kind of to your point, I know you're commenting about, you know, a lot of the people from 8th Street and cutting through there and all that kind of stuff. So part of what we're trying to do with this project also is that's what people are doing now, knowing that that's an easy corridor to get through. When we can make these changes and kind of make it that more neighborhood feel, it's not going to be as, you know, quote, easy for them to just get through it. So the hope is also that a lot of those people that are doing that cut through will then find that different route. John, you had your hand up. Did you? Hold on, I gotta find you. There you are.
Thank you, Brian. The last thing you said was greatly appreciated. I love the idea of designing Linn Street for all 365 days, not just the 25 days or so of the games. It'll be a fact. Every street will be packed and busy. It'll be exciting, but yes, there will be traffic on game day. That's just part of having the stadium and any big major event, just like a luminosity type thing. It's exciting, though, that we're not going to make that plan the 365-day plan, since most days, as we all see, Linn is just a residential street that got built way too wide. So it is good to hear that. A number of us have mentioned that Court and Linn intersection. I know you talked about the bridge. Obviously, it's all sort of a separate project. I know that DOT has some pretty specific guidelines on when a signal can get installed based on state requirements and standards. Could you address what types of guidelines go into that decision, particularly because Court, while it is essentially a dead end into Linn, there's not very much traffic. There's only a sort of a stub on the other side of Linn. It's a major left turn. and it's really tough right now, is the thought process that redesigning the street will tighten up the intersection, make it narrower so it'll feel safer, or is a traffic signal even a possibility at that type of location?
I don't know. I don't have the data there to say how close it is to being warranted, but there are what John was referring to. They're called signal warrants that we have to meet to install a signal. They're based on volume. There's some based on volumes of both streets of the intersection, and there's some that are based on, there's an accident warrant if there's a certain number of accidents within a certain amount of time. I believe, I can't say for certain because this request would not have come to me, but I think I've seen that request enough. I'm assuming we've looked at it and it probably doesn't quite meet those warrants. That doesn't mean one can't be put in when we do this project, because when we take lanes away, it changes the requirements for those warrants. So if we take a travel lane away in each direction on Linn Street, that may be the tipping point to say a warrant or a signal is warranted here and we can install one. So, but also hopefully we can tighten that intersection up enough that it just makes it safer anyway and easier to turn out of too. But going down to one lane is going to make those gaps to turn into smaller as well. So that might be the tipping point to say a signal is needed here. So that's something we can definitely look at with the project.
Thank you. The very last comment on that whole thought process is one of the phrases that'll probably get mentioned a lot is slowing down Linn Street. And I just wanted to confirm the way that you guys view this is that when we say we're going to narrow the street to slow it down, that means keeping cars really at the speed limit as opposed to over the speed limit, not necessarily slowing it down so it's 5 miles an hour. Is that kind of when we say slowing the street down, we mean slowing down to the speed limit as opposed to 50 miles an hour?
Correct. Yes. And no matter what we do, any street, we're going to have people speeding. When we go down to one lane in each direction, you can only speed as fast as the car in front of you. So all it takes is one person to be a law-abiding citizen, and then everybody else has to follow suit. So that's exactly correct, John. That's what we're saying.
Thank you.
And I would like to say we will investigate. I can't guarantee. Speed limits are set by the state of Ohio, the Ohio Revised Code. I believe a good section of Linn Street out here is actually 30 miles an hour. So we will look to get that changed too, but that has to be approved by the state to get that changed to 25, but we will work on that as well.
All right, we had another question. I'll unmute Guyton.
Yes, how's everybody doing? I'd like to thank you for the format. And as mentioned, Mr. Killings, thank you for your comments. I am the superintendent for Cincinnati College Preparatory Academy. We do have a school where we serve grades K through 12. We've got about 1,000 kids in our building. And over the years, I've seen at least 4 to 5 accidents in front of our school building and in the area where the 2 daycares are. And as we're talking about safety and trying to shore up safety for Linn Street, we want to keep in mind that, we have a number of families that are walking to and from school and crossing at crosswalks and also at Linn and Turnbow is pretty dangerous. And we talked about speed limits and we talked about just trying to find ways to keep the students and the families safe in that area. It is a priority to, make sure that when kids are getting out of daycare, parents are picking them up, crossing, going back into the neighborhood, that, safety comes first and that we do everything we can to make sure they can, get to and from school safely. So I hear about, Court Street, and I know that down by Lincoln Center is an issue. But on a daily basis, in the morning, in the afternoon, and at the end of the school day, this is a problem in that area. And so I just wanted to bring that up, make sure everybody is aware. And, I'm looking forward to working with whoever I can to make sure that we keep our families safe.
Thank you.
sorry, I have myself muted. I was talking away, y'all missed it. I would like to add, thank you, Guyton. I would like to add that just something we all need to consider as we move forward with options here is there are a number of schools along here. There's a lot of school buses out here, so we have to make sure we're accommodating those, but obviously in the safest way possible. But so thanks for that, and we'll look forward to working with you.
Brian, there's a question in the chat. What about stop signs if the light can't be approved for Court and Linn?
That is something as well we can evaluate, and that'll all depend on what we end up with at that intersection, a signal or a stop sign. So I think to kind of lay out, I went through the process. The next meeting we'll be looking at a lot of options. Those will still be at that step will be kind of higher level options. So this we probably, because of what I'm about to say, probably should plan for at least a fourth meeting. The next meeting will be, here are different options, and there'll be kind of generic cross sections of bike lanes, parking, wider medians, whatever we come up with. And we'll kind of choose those, and then we'll start to lay them out. Then we'll get into the details of like bump outs at this specific intersection, bump outs, what the detail, more of the details. So we'll be looking kind of generically at the next meeting of this is what we want to do, and then we'll start drawing that up and say these are the details of that and bring that back to you. Someone just asked for the date of the next meeting. We don't have that yet. We'll get that out at the appropriate time. Like I said, we got a lot of work to do. We need to get all your feedback and kind of summarize that and put that all together. We need to, as I mentioned, look at all the crash reports. It was well over, I think, close to 200 of those. So we're going to go through each one of those individually and make sure they're correctly. Everything's correct on them, and we know what's happening out there, because the more detail we have with those, the better we can prevent them from happening in the future. So it'll be, I'll say 2 to 3 months. We'll be looking at the next meeting probably. If we can get everything together sooner, we'll gladly have it a little sooner. I don't see any. Does anybody else have any questions, comments they would like to get in? All right, I don't see anybody else. Thanks, everyone. Keep an eye out. We recorded this meeting. It'll be put on the project page. Let me pull that up here. It'll be put on the project page. We'll have some more information there as it becomes available. We'll put up stuff there. We'll keep in contact with the community council to make sure we're getting out all the information. And when it's time to have that meeting, hopefully we see you all again.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.